Spencer Wetmore is officially a South Carolina state representative representing James Island, Folly Beach, and Kiawah Seabrook Islands. She spent this week her first full week in Colombia, and I speak exclusively with her for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. State Representative Spencer Wetmore, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you for having me, Quintin. I'm such an honor to be here.
Thank you greatly, and congratulations on your win in the special election.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was exciting.
Exciting. Obviously, you were sworn in as state representative earlier this week, and I'm sure that you're getting to know a little bit about what's going on in Colombia. What is your opening statement about the South Carolina House of Representatives?
Wow. It was such an honor to be up there. I mean, just to walk in this chamber of, some pretty important things and see my name up there. And that part was magical. I definitely got the hang of things, pretty quickly. And I would say that, my first thoughts are that I hope this can be a year of working together. It's a pretty tilted in terms of Republican versus Democrat. The House especially is fairly tilted, almost a 2/3 majority for the Republicans, and so it's really going to be a matter of relationships and consensus building. Not, for me, I don't know that getting up at the podium in the well and arguing for everything. For me, it's going to be about consensus building, relationship building, persuasion, and just making sure that we're all, we understand what the people want and that we're doing our best to serve them.
I got to pick apart a couple of those things. You obviously say arguing and obviously building consensus. Mm-hmm. How do you argue for expanding, obviously, absentee voting and talk more about that and have a consensus with this?
Well, that's the thing. The absentee voting bill had come back from the Senate, and there were some things in it that I wasn't excited. They had taken away unmanned drop boxes. Now, I want to talk about that because don't let me forget, but there are still drop boxes, and people need to know that. They're just only going to be there when, during business hours. So, but there were some things in the bill that, I would have liked to see change. The drop boxes in particular were something I was hoping that we could change, but there wasn't enough consensus on that. And so what we were able to pass was expanded absentee voting, and it passed almost unanimously. And so I think that's a good example of, it's not about Republican or Democrat. This was something that the people of South Carolina had contacted their representatives and said, hey, this is important to us. And the representatives listened and passed the bill. Was it perfect? No. But did it accomplish something that I was hoping for? Yes. So I think it's the perfect example of consensus building. We were able to get something through. We compromised on some of the specifics, but at the end of the day, the absentee voting in November, you can list COVID as a reason. So to me, that was the primary outcome.
What exactly were those specifics?
Well, a couple of things. The Dropbox is the main one. We also spent a good bit of time talking about the witness signature requirement. Right. For me, the Dropbox was my priority, just because there's so many people out there, that are working and don't have the opportunity to drop it off during business hours or go during business hours. So I was really sorry to see that. The witness signature piece of it, I am very concerned that there are going to be people who don't have someone to sign their ballot. But I'm hopeful that we can continue to. People will be at the election headquarters if they need it. If we need to find a signature, I think that the party is going to be doing a good job of reaching out to people. If you need a signature, we can facilitate that, right? We can say, hey, we've got a neighbor here who's willing to meet you and witness your signature. Somebody that knows you, somebody that's willing to witness it. For me personally, I don't. One of the more compelling arguments about the witness signature was, if you're going to commit voter fraud, the first thing you're going to do is make sure that you've got the witness signature. So I don't know that the witness signature, requirement is carrying the work of ensuring that we don't have fraud in the elections. But I understand why some people see that as important. So, again, compromising. It wasn't everything that I wanted. It wasn't everything, but we were able to achieve the outcome with, not a perfect bill.
With that witness, initiative to this particular bill, coming from your criminal justice and law background, what more requirements do you want with that?
Well, I mean, for me personally, the time to ensure that we're not fraudulently voting is when the Board of Elections confirms your name, address, and voter registration number. That's how we're ensuring that fraud's not happening. In fact, during the primaries and the runoff, I had a lot of friends, so back in March and April, May, a lot of people had requested absentee ballots. Well, then by the time Election Day came around in June and August,
Right.
some people were saying, well, actually, I think I'm more comfortable going to the polls. Well, what they didn't realize was when they got to the polls, they had to cast a provisional ballot because that's exactly, those are the checks we need to prevent election fraud, right? The Board of Elections knew that person had already requested a ballot, so they were not allowed to vote and have their vote counted until they confirmed that the earlier mailed-in absentee ballot hadn't been also returned. So that's where we're catching fraud. So when I say the witness signature, it's not carrying the weight of fraud prevention that a lot of people wanted to argue. That is happening at the Board of Elections. They have a system. They are ensuring that they check off if once you receive a ballot that's your name, your address, your voter registration number, that's how we're preventing fraud. And so, I think hats off to the incredible work that our county and state boards of election are doing.
And let me get back over to, obviously, the special election. And this is coming from the AP. A South Carolina Democrat has flipped a legislative seat from Republican control and a victory hurdle by some Democrats as a possible signal their party could make more gains this fall. How many more gains do you want to obviously capture to keep your seat permanently?
Well, I think if we see another 20-point margin in November, that would be great. I don't know about more gains, but what's important to know about November is we had a pretty big turnout in August for relative to other special elections. So, normally special elections, you might have a couple thousand people come out. We had over 6,000 people come out on a random Tuesday in August, which is a pretty big deal, right? But we're expecting 20,000 more in November in this district. So, yes, it was big. It was exciting. A lot of that had to do with running a strong campaign, with the fact that I think, me personally, I think a lot of Democrats are really motivated right now to come out and vote. And so I think we'll hopefully, we're going to build on that momentum, and going into November, I'm very confident, but we're still doing the work. We're still campaigning. We're still reaching out to voters. We're not taking anything for granted because, a great result in a special election doesn't necessarily translate unless you put in the work.
And what work do you want to do in Colombia between now and the general election?
Well, so we only have 2 weeks. So, what I had told everyone was that one of my top priorities was the absentee voting expansion. And I was so proud to vote on that bill because that was one of the few things I realistically knew that we'd be able to address. Of course, we also are looking at the CARES Act and the budget coming over from the Senate. With the CARES Act, we voted on some amendments from the Senate. It goes back now for approval, but I was proud to see some improvements and some good work coming out of the CARES Act. This is where we're looking at doing a small and minority-owned business grant. This is where we're looking at doing nonprofit grants. We're putting aside millions, $75 million for DHEC, another $20 million for MUSC to be doing COVID testing. So another really good accomplishment that I was really proud of. One thing that was a little disappointing to me is I'd really hoped that we were going to take up the Senate's budget. Right now, it looks like that's going to go to a conference committee. Right. So members from the House and members of the Senate coming together to try to compromise on where the two bills differ. And this is one of those times where, unfortunately, the leadership is saying, that I don't know that we're going to take up the budget. Now, the good news and what I will support if it's true is that by delaying till January to ensure that we do make the revenues that we're projecting in the budget, we can actually build on what the Senate proposed. And so if that happens, I will be glad to see it. But it was certainly disappointing for, our state essential employees who've been coming into work every day, for our teachers. But I remain hopeful that we're going to really do right by all these folks, either next week or more likely in January.
What are the revenues looking like right now, Representative?
Well, looking at they're projecting actually surplus again. So they're saying that there's, pretty near what we actually had thought back in March when the House was first drafting the bill. They actually projected a pretty similar surplus, and some of that actually in recurring dollars. So I'm optimistic. I understand why the House leadership wants to be conservative. There's still a lot of economic uncertainty. I think we're seeing that now. But I'm optimistic about it, and I'm certainly going to fight like hell to make sure that we address a lot of the pressing needs in the state if these projections hold true.
Now, you were talking about it earlier about the budget coming from the Senate and the amendments. Mm-hmm. What amendments stick out in your mind right now?
Well, so the budget coming from the Senate really, it put money towards the unemployment insurance fund, or that's the trust fund. Right. And but it had $50 million in there for teachers. It had $24 million in there for state employees. So those were the kinds of things I was really hoping that we would take up on the House side. At this point, I don't know that we're going to.
Is there a loophole to get that to make that happen? Actually,
unfortunately, not. The Democrats had attempted to introduce an amendment to the CARES Act, which is federal money coming in for the purpose of reimbursement for COVID expenses. We had attempted to introduce an amendment providing for the teachers, and another amendment providing for state workers. Unfortunately, the state workers amendment was tabled, and the teachers amendment was actually found by the speaker not to be germane. So in other words, it didn't sufficiently relate to the CARES Act to be talking about it as an amendment to the CARES Act. So that was disappointing. But again, we're in this to serve for the long term, and I'm looking forward to taking these issues up again.
Yes, indeed. Well, State Representative Spencer Wetmore, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you.